David said, can I ask a point of personal privilege? Omar, I would love to know what would have been different about the strategies and the impact of the civil rights movement if they had had social media?
So, I mean, I think it's important, so it's a great question, and I think it's important to appreciate that we have a fragmented media in the 1960s. Right. There is a pro-segregation press in the South, there is an anti-segregation black press, and there is a sort of indifferent national white press. And so some of what we see in this like hyper fragmented media today exists in part in that era. And the kind of some of the core logic of like how the civil rights movement worked remains, I think, true in the era of social media. So Darnella Frazier is a 17-year-old teenager who has the presence of mind to take out her phone and document the killing of George Floyd. And that is different in that she is not like ABC or NBC with a news crew, and so there's this kind of distributed power in now everybody has a camera and can document something that's happening around them. In the civil rights era, they really needed these like traditional news networks to show up. But the core logic of like a visual representation of a profound injustice can move people, I think, remains in some ways the same, right? And that's like, I think at some core level, like humans respond to a certain kind of narrative power, and that was true then and is true now. Maybe one important difference is like there's a kind of saturation effect. We're getting more of these stories, and I think people may become a little desensitized in the present moment with social media. But I think the 2020 example suggests that like there's still a power for a certain kind of imagery to really punch through and get people to pause and say, wow, that feels like unacceptable.
Well,
So
let me ask you.
And to be clear, that was posted to Facebook, right? Like that's you know, it's both the power of the camera and the power of distribution. Sorry.
So one of the things I think is interesting here, two things that I think are interesting. I believe if we had been talking for a long time about carbon pollution and the poisoning impact of carbon pollution, and that carbon pollution is being dumped in your community, we would have had a lot more movement than climate change. I mean, to tell people that the earth is boiling is to just demobilize them. You know, there was a very famous experiment in the crime area where Nixon had put on ads that were showing a young woman walking in an alley and then being raped, although you didn't see the rape, obviously, and then Nixon came on for crime. And it didn't move its numbers on crime at all in the testing. And the reason it didn't is women in particular were so focused emotionally and hung up on the emotions of that predatory rape. They didn't even get like who was doing what. I mean, I was kind of focused on the woman. So I emphasize that you can't scare people straight. I also think some of the lessons from the civil rights movement, and you are by far the expert, but I have studied that movement a little bit in terms of how they went back to values. Like many of the civil rights movement activists wanted to carry communist flags in their marches. And Martin Luther King said absolutely no pictures of communist flags, absolutely no communist flags. Everybody has to carry American flags. And they would hand out American flags. They put children, they said, they talked to the reporters and they said, we want children in every picture. There was a reason Birmingham was the Children's March. And again, other people may be more expert on this, but there was a real understanding of how to engage values. And I think we just think that another statistic, I mean, like 1.5 degree warming, really? I mean, I don't even turn on my air conditioning for a 1.5 degree increase in warming. Like, that's a lot. I mean, people are terrible at math, okay? This is a basic principle. And so the way that we talk about this doesn't have the emotional and iconic kinds of coverage. The other thing that Martin Luther King they tried very hard to do, all of the outlets the northern outlets were sending white reporters to the South because they were afraid of the death threats, et cetera, on any of their reporters, but particularly if they sent black reporters. Ebony was the one exception. Ebony sent a black reporter, which was game-changing in terms of some of the coverage. But the civil rights movement was pushing. You have to, and it's to your point, Ruth, actually, I think, this ground up versus ground down. You've got to send black reporters. Only if black reporters come will we really get the emotional understanding that we want in what we're trying to do here. So I think there are a lot of lessons about how the civil rights movement used values and emotions and symbolism. And in some ways, the climate change movement is almost doing the reverse. Like throwing paint, I mean, most young people don't even want to go to a museum. Throwing paint on a painting that nobody knows, and you know, very few people have seen. Well, maybe that's guerrilla action, but I doubt it.